Welcome to Casting Your Net, Finding Your Ancestors Online, which sort of goes with our Summer Reading Club theme of Oceans of Possibilities, which is why I sort of have it called Casting Your Net, Finding Your Ancestors Online. So we're going to talk about a few things here. We're going to talk about myths of genealogy searching in particular. We're going to talk about some common genealogy pitfalls. I do have a case study that we're going to show, a brand new one that you haven't seen before. And then we're going to not necessarily go on live to the websites. We're going to talk about what is available on different websites. And if time permits, then we can go live and answer some specific questions. Okay. For some of you, this may be old news, but a few things about the internet that some people think. Everything is online and searchable. Not necessarily true. Other people think that if it's not on Ancestry, Family Search, or Find a Grave, then the records don't exist. After all, they're the alpha and omega, right? I mean, that's the end all. Information on the internet is always correct. It's in black and white, so it's got to be correct, right? That's what they always tell you. You know, if it's in black and white in print, it's got to be correct. And we'll see it's not always the case. Official governments are always accurate and complete. And then Google knows everything. So, I mean, Google knows a lot, but they don't know quite everything yet. So in terms of myth number one, everything is available and searchable online. Think of your local public library, whether you're here in Wayne County, whether you're over in Ashland County, wherever the case may be, and think of the vast amount of information that's available in your public library. And then think about, well, how much of the information is actually available online? And how many of those digital records, if the library has put the stuff online, are actually searchable? And that sort of puts in perspective, because if you're looking at just our department here in Worcester, then you're going to realize that the majority of our stuff is not online. Probably less than 1% of what we have is available online. So that gives you 99% of other stuff that you're not going to find elsewhere unless you actually visit the library. And we're just one little library in the whole ocean of libraries, whether you're talking about the United States, Canada, all over the world. It's estimated that more than 117,000 libraries are out in operation here in the United States. So if we're one little library and we only have less than 1%, then I'm going to guess a lot of those other thousands of libraries are very much the same way. Because whenever you're adding information to the internet, it actually costs money. Whether you actually outsource it, whether you are staff actually adding information on the resource, everything is not free. And then if you sort of imagine, sort of blow it up even bigger proportion, imagine how many libraries there are in the world. And do you really think that every library in every nation has their entire collection available and searchable online? Definitely no. And that's just the public libraries, but also take into consideration the academic libraries, the specialized libraries, museums, archives at all levels. We're not going to all have everything on the internet. There's just no amount of time in the world for that, and you also have to deal with copyright issues which a lot of people don't even understand. You have to be careful with what you put on the internet because a lot of it is protected by copyright. And then you go into the government entities. Now, there's a lot of places that are adding a lot of the more recent records online, or at least indexes to a lot of the records, but you're going to still have a plethora of information of records and documents located at the government facilities that's not going to be available online. And that's here in the United States, all the US territories, and then you can always think broader in terms of the whole world. And then you also have other repositories, churches, cemeteries, funeral homes, even private collections. These are all places that you can actually go to try to do research. They all have records of some sort. Sometimes they're in book records. If you're talking about cemeteries, they may not necessarily have an actual cemetery record book, but you may find like grave diggers books, or you can just walk to cemetery for the tombstones because those are actually records as well. You hear so much about Ancestry and Family Search, and a lot of people use Find a Grave, that these are basically the three biggest sites that people go to do research. And they're definitely full of information, but doesn't have everything. Back in the 1990s, Cindy Ingalls, how is her name right now, she actually goes through and she created a Cindy's list, which she tried to actually do a subject guide of all the genealogy links out there on the web. And she's all the time she and her crew are actively updating these links, etc. And as of just this past weekend, there were more than 317,000 genealogy links on Cindy's list. And these are organized into nearly 230 categories. So that gives you an idea. There's a lot of other databases out there rather than just Ancestry, Family Search, Find a Grave. There's an article you can find online from Family Tree Magazine that gives you 101 best genealogy websites from 2022. There's a lot of places, and another website, Lifewire, actually provides the top 8 free websites, and you do see Family Search there. The US Gen Web Project, which a lot of people don't look much at anymore. It's all basically text-based, not a lot of visual, not a lot of documents on there. Access Genealogy. The Allen County Public Library has a tremendous resource as well with their Record Center, with their genealogy collection. Jewish Gen, Olive Tree Genealogy, the Ontario, Canada Genealogical Society website, as well as the National Archives in Washington, D.C., as well as all different branches. So these are some of the top free websites you can look at. And you got to wonder, how many of you actually have used some of these databases? If you're like me, I focus a lot on Family Search, on Ancestry. Sometimes I've used Access Genealogy. Sometimes I've looked at Allen County Public Library. They're in Indiana and Fort Wayne, which is the second largest library basically in the world, second to Family Search Library, pretty much. But that's not limited to just the Allen County area. They have a lot of other resources that's related to other counties over in Indiana as well as other states. There's another website, #1reviews.com, that ranks the top 10 genealogy websites, and they actually included not only just the free websites, but some paying websites. So those with $ means that there's a cost involved. So, of course, the top 3 dealt with Ancestry.com, which is in the US, .uk, which involves the United Kingdom, and AU would be Australia. And then MyHeritage, the National Archives in the US, as well as United Kingdom, made their top 10 list. Family Search made their top 10 list. Commonwealth War Graves Commission, as well as FindMyPast.com, as well as GeniaNet. So there's a few others on here that I haven't actually played with, that at your convenience you may want to just go online and see what you may find there. A lot of people believe that all of the information on the internet is always correct. And a lot of people, they go to the compiled genealogies first. And compiled genealogies actually have secondary information. And so that information is only going to be as accurate as what the researcher who compiled the information has provided the information on. And a lot of times it does not include full citations. That's improving a lot now with Ancestry and Family Search. There's ways you can actually attach documents and stuff to your public trees. You're also going to come across indexing errors, and these could be machine-made errors using OCR or artificial intelligence. For example, this past year, the 1950 U.S. Census was released, and they actually used artificial intelligence to do the indexing of that. So, which is why it's pretty much all indexed now. Where with the 1940, you had to manually put the stuff in. But artificial intelligence has difficult time reading script a lot of times, so there may be some inaccuracies there. And of course, there's always human error if you're actually adding information on there. You may find incomplete indexes. You may have just a plaintiff-only index, or it could be just a surname-only index and not an every name index. So those are just a few things you have to deal with. Not to mention trying to learn how to decipher the handwriting. You're going to come across pages in your research that you just cannot read. Either the handwriting is just too difficult to read, you're not used to reading the old script. It could be faded. It could be in a colored ink form, because sometimes red or yellows don't always copy good. And you may also have ink blots. And then you also have misinterpretation of letters, such as A's and O's are often mixed up, E's and I's. If you see a double F, it usually means it's double S and not double F. U and N's are mixed up, and a lot of times capital L and capital S. And there's a lot of other errors in terms of deciphering handwriting. A lot of people think if they get a birth record, a death record, or a death certificate, a marriage record, these official government documents are accurate and complete, and this is not necessarily the case. A lot of the information on these documents is dependent on who the informant is and how informed that informant is. Not all information on government documents are primary or first-hand information. A lot of times it's secondary information or second-hand. Other times you may find information on documents that are intentionally falsified or misrepresented. And why do you think that may happen? What would be a reason why there would be a misrepresentation on a record?
Getting married.
Yes, getting married underage.
Jail time.
Jail time. Could also be that, they have a baby. That first baby comes at any time rather than the 9 months, and so they try to go back and correct the records to make it show that, it wasn't conceived prior to the marriage. You also may want people who are trying to avoid the draft, and so they may understate their age as well when you're talking about military records. Some of the documents may include clerical errors, because maybe the clerk has had to recopy over records. Sometimes records have been lost or mishandled, and they've had to reissue the landees or reindex or try to recollect some of that stuff. You may also find that the documents are not always recorded at the time that the event's being recorded. Meaning if you're looking at here in like Wayne County for birth records and death records between 1867 and 1908, those records were not done at the time that the event took place. They're usually recorded twice a year, maybe 3 times a year in some places.
Also the census.
Yes. The census has a few issues as well, definitely. You also come across problems that people did not follow the law according to what the law stated. So you may have adoption cases that are sealed, that they sort of tucked away the true information, etc. So a lot of times on the census records, you may also find that a woman is indicating she's widowed rather than divorced. And this happened with my great-grandmother. She's living in Akron in 1940, and she's listed as divorced. Her husband's not with her. She's with 4 kids. My grandmother is not listed there because she was up giving birth to a child up in Cleveland area. And her husband was definitely alive and well over in Pennsylvania. He died about a year later over in Pennsylvania. And he still recognized that they were married because it said that he was survived by his wife. So, but a lot of times if they're separated, the woman sometimes she would just indicate she's widowed rather than just a divorcee because it just looked better on her part. Mm-hmm. And of course, you have the 5th myth that Google knows everything. Yeah, a lot of people come in, they think they can type in their name on Google and they're going to magically appear with this complete family tree with all their ancestors dating clear back to Adam and Eve and then get all the research done within 5 minutes time. No, that doesn't happen. Or you'll see on TV where you have Ancestry where they say, yeah, I found that shaky leaf and it took my family back 4 more generations. I don't know about you, but those shaky leaves never really worked for me. So, and Ancestry does provide hints that may go back several more generations, but you still have to do your due diligence and make sure that that shaky leaf is not on the wrong branch of the tree, because that happens from time to time. There are several pitfalls for genealogy researchers, especially those who are just beginning doing research. And sometimes these pitfalls can serve as a double-edged sword. So sometimes they're bad, but sometimes in terms of on the internet, you can now trace your family easier. You can find out where they moved to from one place to another. Where years ago, if you had to depend on the newspapers and you'd hope they make a mention that so-and-so is off visiting their son over in Wisconsin. And that's how you could tell whenever families would be moving. Well, now with the internet and with a lot of the records searchable, you can try to follow them up through like the US Census, and you're going to find that, oh, they were not always in Washington County, Ohio. They may have been in Warren County, Ohio for a while, and then Monroe County, and Noble County, and Washington County. And you wouldn't have known that otherwise. It used to take a lot longer to actually go through that kind of information. There's a lot of people that also indicate that the family that we find in the records cannot be their family, because by golly, my family spells their last name with an E, and that spells the last name with an I. So it can't be my family whatsoever. That's definitely a pitfall, and a lot of researchers run into brick walls just because they have this mentality that either the family never moved or that the family always spelled their name the way that they currently spell it. A lot of other people also just want to research the direct line. They want to just research the parents, the grandparents, and great-grandparents. And that may be good for beginners, but eventually you're going to have to go back and research what we call the collateral lines, which would include like the aunts, the uncles, the cousins. Because a lot of times you're going to find information on one of your collateral lines that may give you clues to your direct ancestor. And if you don't research those collateral lines, then you're going to miss that opportunity. Several years ago, we actually had an individual come in, a gentleman, and he said that he does not research the female line of the family. Those darn females change their name all the time. Well, alrighty then. And he wondered why he was at a brick wall. And then the other one is that researchers will say, well, I don't have time to cite my information. Who cares? Anyway, I know where it came from. What does it matter anyway? Well, it does matter, and we'll see that here in a little bit. Addressing pitfall number 1 in terms of my family never moved. Well, you may be surprised at how mobile your ancestors were. It may have taken them a little bit longer to get from point A to point B, but they were more mobile than what you would think they were. You have to take in consideration the push-pull factor. My West Virginia accent is coming in as push. The push-pull factor. Sometimes, what would cause people to move? Humans haven't changed in centuries. I mean, if there's economic opportunities, they're going to move. If their family moves, there's a good possibility that they're going to move along to be closer to their family. If you have a church group that's moving across, like the Mormons, they're going to move together as a group.
That happened to me today.
Ah, okay.
I was doing stuff this morning, and it said a relative was, one of my relatives was one of the ones that went in 1848 with the Mormons. They left to go west. And he was 11 years old and kept a diary.
Okay, wow, there you go.
Read and write,
So, direct ancestor or collateral line?
My direct.
Your direct?
Back to my 6th great grandparents.
Okay.
And then the grandmother on that line, last name was Chaplet, I think, I'm not sure. That's the wrong word. But anyways, and then her son, his daughter, and then her son.
Okay.
So it was down there. That kid was born in 1836 or 7, around there.
Okay. So there you go. Yeah, a fine example of
pushing
west. You may also encounter persecution, which the Mormons did. But it wasn't just the Mormons. There's other groups here in the United States that face persecution as well. Our nation was supposed to be founded on religious freedom, and that was not always the case. Yeah, so people think that there was not persecution early on in the United States, and there's always been persecution. There's always been those groups that have been persecuted in some way or some fashion or some form. So,
how about the Indians?
That's a whole other topic. Yes, they've been persecuted from day one. So, Here's an example of a John Francis Stryker, one of my relatives, collateral line that did not stay put. This is an example that my grandmother used to say, and I've talked about them in previous talks before, that, my grandmother always thought the Strykers were from Washington County, Ohio. And I find them in 1850 over in Warren County, Ohio, which is on the southwestern Ohio as opposed to southeastern Ohio. But when I got the pension papers of John Francis Stryker, it shows that he was actually born in Hamilton County, Ohio in 1842. Not to be mixed up where they were residing in 1850, which is Hamilton Township, Warren County, Ohio. And then by 1860, he's living with his aunt over in Adams Township in Washington County, Ohio. He did serve in the Civil War. According to his pension records, he moved to Illinois for a short time. He married, and then he later moved to Nebraska, and he settled on a homestead there in Adams County, Nebraska, which is why my grandmother never knew where he had disappeared to. He sort of moved. And I was able to trace him through the pension papers. One of the other pitfalls was that, this family cannot be mine because they spelled their name with an E as opposed to an I. By golly, names were spelled phonetically back in the day. We didn't have spelling bee champs around. Nicknames were sometimes used. Sometimes you may find initials. Names were changed, sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, especially when you're dealing with a persecuted group, such as the Germans, the Jewish, some of the Eastern European names. During World War I, World War II, you didn't want to be affiliated with the Germans, so you may anglicize your name a little bit more so you wouldn't be considered German. The Irish were persecuted for a while, so they may change their name a little bit so they sound less Irish, just so they would be accepted. The Italians were persecuted as well. And so they may change their names a little bit. You also have immigration. Remember, the United States was a melting pot. So whenever you'd have people recording the records, they may not have, there could have been a language barrier. They may have been able to understand just a little bit of broken English. They may not have had a translator nearby. So you're going to have accents. So that may lend itself to names being spelled phonetically. And so, such as, I tried to find Orson Reed for years in the census record, and I found him underneath Harrison instead of Orson. And that's with his first name. And you also have illiteracy as well as difficulty in deciphering of handwriting. Of course, today you have Google Translate. So back in the day, they couldn't just pull out their cell phone and say, Google how you translate this. They actually had to try to understand each other without the technology, or without maybe someone being nearby. And this is with my mom's dad's side of the family. The original name was Mucklewain, and he eventually was spelled Wayne. My third great-grandfather changed it from Mucklewain down to W-A-Y-N-E. And of course, you have the spelling W-A-I-N. Now, my grandmother said it was because there's horse thieves in the family, and the one side didn't want to be affiliated with the other. That could be true with my family. I'm not sure on that. But I think it's just because it's how the census taker spelled the name, because I actually found it spelled as W-A-I-N in one of the census records. And the very next one was spelled W-A-Y-N-E. And Stryker has been spelled S-T-R-Y-K-E-R and S-T-R-I-K-E-R and S-T-R-I-C-K-E-R. Not to be mixed up with the Stricker family. Stricker. Yeah, S-T-R-I-C-K-E-R.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, I better be careful here with my pronunciation. Yeah, they may have. Some of the branches you wonder about, including my husband's side.
We're not talking about him.
Yeah, we're not going to go down that path. No. So, a lot of researchers, when they're first starting out, they're just interested in researching the direct line. Well, eventually, they're going to run into a brick wall, and they're going to not know or understand how you can go around that brick wall to try to find ancestors. For example, I use this quite a few times in past classes, but if you have a family of like 10 kids, maybe 5 of them died in Ohio after 1908 when the death certificates were mandated here. And out of those 5, maybe one of them indicates that their father was from Washington County, Pennsylvania, and all the others say Pennsylvania. And that one that said Washington County, Pennsylvania is usually the female, and usually not my direct line. So if I wouldn't have actually done research on the collateral lines, you can easily miss that clue that can now lead you back into Washington County, Pennsylvania, as opposed to the big state of Pennsylvania. You also want to research the fan club, and this is actually really important if you're doing immigration as well, because there's a good possibility when you're trying to find the hometown of your immigrant ancestor, you may find all of the records and not a single one will say more than just they're over in Austro-Hungarian Empire, pretty much. But with immigrants, they would come here and they would settle in communities that were very similar to them. So if you can research and look at maybe other individuals who may have been from the Eastern European bloc who settled near your ancestor, tracing those, although they're not part of your direct family, there's a good possibility they were from the same hometown that your ancestor was from. And so if you don't take the time to research the friends, associates, and neighbors, then you may miss that clue in terms of finding the hometown of your ancestor.
That's
So.
what I'm trying to find.
I do that on the census. I read the page before it, that full page, and well, actually, this the ones from Pennsylvania were listed at the bottom of the census page, and that's just all it said. There are kids who also included an 8-year-old child that I think was a servant in that house, was actually my relative.
Okay.
That was on the next page and was not listed like, on the list for the.
On like the abstract and yeah.
That those children on the next page were part of that family on the previous page.
Right.
Not list that.
Right. And you have to be careful. And we used to call, you look at the 10 rule. So you look at the 10 families before your ancestor and you look at the 10 families after. And that's one way I'm going to have to work with James, trying to find my Henry Stryker and see if I can find any other connections with the people near him to see if I can find any clues to where Henry really came from, because I only find him in the one record. So I'm going to have to really use the fan club to try to figure that out. And, my one clue is that the James Stryker who's living next door. So I really think he's of some connection, some family connection, but I haven't figured that out yet. Yeah, I do not research the female side of the family. Who's usually the one who keeps records in the family? Is it the father?
No.
It's usually the mother, and then a lot of times it's the daughters that carry on the oral tradition or the oral families, the grandmothers. I mean, if it wouldn't have been for my grandmother, I wouldn't have half the stuff I have today on my family. Well, I probably would have. It would just take me much longer to research it.
My mother-in-law threw away a whole bunch of stuff before I caught her.
Yeah.
I said, give it to me, I'll take it. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of stuff and old pictures.
Yeah.
That she was just going to throw away.
That's what my mother-in-law nearly did. When we were helping her clean out her house when she was moving from Brunswick down here, she's like, I don't want these. And they were photo albums of her as a child. And so she said, she threw them at my mom because my mom and dad had helped me move her, not my husband. And she's like, if you don't take these, I'm going to just dump them. She was mad because she was left a widow unexpectedly, and she just didn't care. And so she was going to dump all of those pictures, and it's a whole album of stuff. And, my father-in-law actually kept a Bible, and anything of importance he put into that Bible. And so it was very thick and stuff, and I salvaged that as well. So,
Back in older times, women did not read and write. It was men. There was a lot of men that wrote in the Bible,
yeah.
or in records, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or the preacher or the priest did it.
Yeah.
Because people just could, like my ancestors on my dad's side,
Mm-hmm.
did not read or write. Maybe a few of them later, like maybe by the 17 or 1800s, but before that.
Right.
But all the history I have for them is back to the 1500s. The late 1500s is the Jesuits that wrote, because they were trying to convert them to.
Yeah, Jesuits kept good records too.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. If you're in the New England area, the lady folk were very well educated. It's once they moved out west, sometimes that education, they just did not have that opportunity because they were too busy just trying to make a living. And a lot of times, no. Nope. They may actually have a mind of their own then.
You couldn't read and write, you couldn't own property. You couldn't speak for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't sign any legal documents.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's the whole thing what caused the Seneca Falls,
Yeah.
you know, in 1848, you know, the whole the resolutions there of the Declaration of Sentiments, you know,
Right.
it's like these are shortcomings, you know, we don't have these rights.
Right.
So.
Susan B. Anthony, that's on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
She was a big proponent of, she didn't believe in abortion, but she believed in birth control.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
She was a friend, you know, a Quaker.
Yeah.
I mean, she went to jail. She believed in voting. She thought every woman should know to read and write.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to her house.
Okay.
Her story is written on all the walls in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they cleared it out. It's a museum. Her life story is written on the walls in there.
Okay.
It's amazing.
I haven't made it to that homestead yet, to her house.
You would
So,
like that. You would like it.
yeah. Yeah. Do you guys fully cite your resources?
I do.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you get so caught up in the search that you sort of forget to do the source citations. And it's important to actually remember to cite your sources because you are going to find discrepancies in the data. Hard to believe, you know, that data just may not match other records. And if you don't know where you got your information from, how do you know if your records are more or your information's better than someone else's records?
If I get it out of a book, I write the name of the book and the page, you know, the year and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne County or Ashland County or whatever.
Yeah. You also want to take the next step in actually recording your research online as well, and the sources from there. And of course, with Ancestry, a lot of times you can just, you know, yeah, just print.
Ancestry is the same.
Yeah. Or you can actually, if you don't want to print, you can always put them into like a Word document and then include the source citations at the bottom of that page. That way you have it there and file that in your records. So you're going to find discrepancies. You may find discrepancies within your own research. And so if you have it cited, you can double check your work. You can say, this doesn't quite make sense. Where did I get this information from? And if you have it cited, it's like, oh, this is when I was a novice researcher. I didn't know any better. This is, you know, something more recent. So I've learned how to do things a little better. Here's an example of a patent buyer's Prague who is married to an Anna T. Hayden. This is going to go along with a little case study I have here that's different from anything else, like I said, that I've done in this class. So I found that this patent Prague married an Anna Hayden in Vigo County, Indiana. This is June 20th, 1836. And so I made a notation. This is down in, I found this on Ancestry today, in Indiana U.S. compiled marriages. By the way, Ancestry is not considered a source. You want to actually cite the citation, the original database in there, where it originally came from. And I also found a marriage abstract on Indiana marriages through 1850, which is through the Indiana State Library. So once again, I even went outside of Ancestry to follow through. Well, in the 1850 census, it shows, now Gertrude is living in Pennsylvania by this time, but it shows that she was born in Indiana. 1860, she's born in Massachusetts. 1870, she's in Rhode Island, as well as 1880. 1900 census, she was born in New York. 1910 census in Pennsylvania. And according to her 1916 Pennsylvania death certificate, she was born in Washington County, Pennsylvania. So how do you know which one's correct? A lot of times whenever you have this discrepancy, you sort of want to go to the earliest record closest to the event. So Indiana, you know that they're married. They're in Vigo County, Indiana in 1836. Gertrude was born about 1838, I believe, that time period. And
that's a very unusual name.
Yeah, well, Prague is spelled a couple different ways. So, yeah. But I'm going to guess 1850 would be the first census that she's actually listed in. And I think she's living with relatives at this time because I believe both of her parents are deceased. So, but when you're looking at the census records, you have no idea who is providing that information. You do not know if it's the farmhand, if it's a neighbor, if it's someone in the household.
The 5-year-old that answered the door?
Yes, you have no idea, except for 1940 census. You do know who answered it at that point because the 1940 census includes a circle with an X next to the individual who's given the information. So you do not know. So in this case, this is unknown information, unknown source, who actually gave the provided information. Probably 1870 and 1880, the same person gave it since, it was the same as being Rhode Island. But I'm going to guess that she was actually born in Indiana, only because it's closest to the time period. But I'd have to do further research on this Patton and Prague and see where they're at, maybe in 1840 census as well. So how many of you guys actually take the time to analyze your documents? Or
read every line?
Read every line. Pay attention to the smallest of details. That's very important. Not only do you want to read it, but you want to understand the document. So, is the document you're looking at, is it an original source? Is it derivative, or is it an authored source? Author meaning, is it a biographical sketch, or is it a compiled genealogy? Is it some type of narrative? Is that document an original birth certificate or original marriage record? Or is it a derivative, meaning that it's just an abstract of the census, or it's just an abstract of the marriage record? You also want to take in consideration the type of information. Is this information primary, is it secondary, or is it undetermined? The census records, it's undetermined. You do not know who the source of the information is. Primary information is usually firsthand, so they have firsthand knowledge about the information. Secondary, which would be secondhand information. And within one document, you may have both primary and secondary information, such as a death certificate. That does not include, even the original death certificate does not always include all primary information. So you also want to take
that might not be true either.
Right. I mean, you hope that the name of the deceased is correct and the date of death is correct and the cause of death is correct, but other than that, all the other information is secondary. Although I have found that the name of the deceased was wrong too, so on one of the records years ago. You also want to understand, is the information you find, is it providing direct evidence or indirect evidence to your question at hand? And we're going to talk about a research plan, which is very important when you're doing not only research online, but even when you're going to different places to do research. You also want to make sure, does the information you see on the records are making sense? You're not going to have a 70-year-old woman who's giving birth to a newborn baby. You're not going to have a 9-year-old daughter who's getting married in the United States. Usually not.
Right.
Usually not. Not as a standard rule. Right. Maybe 14 or 15, but 9 is still a little bit young. But it has happened among some groups. So it is a possibility, but it's not the norm. 8-year-olds usually don't serve in the military, but there's always exceptions to the rule. That's genealogy. Sometimes they're 10, 11 years old. Sometimes you may have an 8-year-old boy. If their father is serving, they may be in there. So you may find someone as young as 8-year-old serving, but it's one of those things you're going to want to vet and see, because these would be unusual circumstances, usually. And usually you have to be born before you get married. Normally.
That's a good idea.
Now, I mean, there have been known as prearranged marriages, but actually someone has to at least be in the womb even to consider a preconceived marriage, usually. So when you're looking at those compiled genealogies, pay attention, because I don't know how many times I have found people that were born, that they were getting married before they were even born. So you also want to pay attention to gaps in the ages of the children. If you have 3 children in a household, Robert, who's maybe age 18, Elizabeth, age 15, and then you have a Sarah who's age 5, you're going to want to question that. Because especially in the 1800s, early 1900s, you're going to have kids every pretty much 18 months to 2 years. Now, is there a possibility that there could have been an epidemic and it wiped out, maybe 3 kids in between those ages? It's a possibility, but you'd have to do your research.
Or it could be step.
Right, it could be. You also want to pay attention to the name of the wife and the ages of the inferred husband and wife, but also pay attention to other records, because you may find, like in the 1850 census, you may find like a John Smith who's age 70 and an Elizabeth who's age 23. And then you have maybe a Sarah age 21. And you would think that Elizabeth could be a daughter, but no, that Elizabeth could be a wife.
That's Elle's grandmother and grandfather,
Yeah.
63 and 16.
Yeah. So you have to, and remember, those early census records don't include a relationship. That doesn't start until the 1880 census. But even I have found on the 1880 and more recent census records that sometimes the relationship is not given accurately. I mean, it's an assumption. In the 1920 census, or 1930, maybe 1930 census for my grandfather, he was listed as a stepson. He wasn't. He was living with his biological father. So there's a relationship that was even given wrong even that late in the census records. And we mentioned, and you also have to be careful. Did you have the husband married to 2 different women named Sarah, who was born about the same time period?
Good, because that was a popular name.
Yes. And I have had a problem. I have encountered this within doing some research. So you really have to do your diligence and actually research thoroughly. A lot of people fall into pitfalls, or they get into a genealogy brick wall and they don't know how to proceed because they don't utilize research tools. When you come across a discrepancy in the records, you may want to do a comparison and contrast chart. And you compare one census to another census, or you may compare records going down. Because especially if you have a common name that you're trying to research, if you find 2 John Smiths in 2 different places, then you're going to have to figure out which John Smith is your John Smith. But you may have to follow each John Smith down through the line to find out which one is your correct one. You also want to do timelines. I don't know how many times I've actually taken advantage of using the timeline to see what's going on. And when I say timeline, don't restrict it just to the births, the deaths, the marriages. Take a look in terms of what's going on in that state, maybe locally and regionally or even nationally, to find out what may be going on. Because that may answer why your ancestor moved from Hungary over here to the United States. Because you can see the timeline. You can see maybe who the governing official would have been at that point, the owning country, the administration.
Or running from the Bolsheviks.
Yeah. You also want to use research logs. And this is where you're recording the research that you're doing. And you want to record both your positive research as well as your negative research. Because there's nothing more frustrating than searching in the same record twice because you did not keep track of that you already did that research. Because you could have spent those hours looking at new records if you had actually recorded that. Oh, I looked at this source 2 years ago, type thing. You want to keep track of your correspondences, and you also want to use checklists. We have some of these forms upstairs. I've passed them out before. I just didn't make copies for tonight's program. A lot of other people, they do not do an exhaustive search. They may be exhaustive doing their search, but they don't. But they do not do a non-exhaustive search, meaning that since we're focusing on online research, they may limit their research to only those records that are easily accessible online. Only those records that may be available through the search engine of Family Search, or those records available through Ancestry, or just those records on Find a Grave. They completely ignore all the other potential records out there, and they wonder why things are not jiving. They're finding out that they've spent 20 years researching the whole wrong line because they did not do the due diligence in terms of doing that exhaustive research and making sure that you are researching the right branch of the family. A lot of people also depend solely on the index or the abstract They do not go to the original source to look at it. I don't know how many times, even in Ancestry and Family Search, that I have found people, they were completely indexed wrong. The abstract was wrong. And I almost didn't look at it, but it's like, no, I better take a look at this. And I see that the index or the abstract is completely wrong, and it is the person I was researching. You also want to seek out the original document. Try to get back to the original source as much as possible. And I'm sorry, if you're finding a compiled genealogy and they cite their source that I got this from another compiled genealogy, and then you go to that compiled genealogy and they're like, well, I got that from another compiled genealogy. No, do the original research, find the original document. So you may find that when you're writing up your narrative, that things begin making sense, or they don't make sense, or you realize that I forgot this or forgot that. We actually had a researcher, he spent this year, a few months ago, actually writing up his family history. Now, I've been after him for years to write up his family history. And so he actually is writing up his family narrative, and he's like, I don't realize, I completely forgot to research this record or that record or this other record. I completely forgot this ancestor. And so he actually, writing the narrative, it was almost like a check. It's like, oh, I still need to do some additional research, or I forgot to follow through on the research on this individual. So writing up your narrative, whether it is a narrative of your own memories or whether it's a narrative summarizing your research, almost like a lot of times professional genealogists say, they write up these reports for their clients, and they say, have you written up a report for your own self?
Where do you start?
Just anywhere. Just start.
Like my life story.
Yeah, you can start there. Sometimes it's easier to start with the known, and then, or you may just choose an ancestor that you find that may have an interesting storyline, and maybe you want to focus on that ancestor. There's no rhyme or reason. You can just start with whichever one you feel most comfortable, and you don't even have to have a full narrative. You want to do bullet lists, like a bullet journal to get started, you can even do that. But the idea is to begin writing down your memories and writing down that narrative, whether it's through your own memories or through your research and some of your ancestors' lines or your husband's lines, whatever you may want to be. Just take the time, and even if you just devote 15 minutes a day or, to doing a little bit of writing.
Somebody's got to know this stuff to be able to put it out there, because she doesn't want to digitize it and just flood the market with it. She just wants to do the genie hoarder. That's what I call her.
Yeah,
She knows she is.
Yeah, you need to be willing to share, because sometimes if you write up an article about a newsletter, and for the last 4 years, I've talked about writing up my Henry Stryker, because OGS has a couple writing contests, and when you're actually writing up for a newsletter or for a magazine, you never know who's reading that, and you may find out that you have a cousin who may be able to fill in some of those missing gaps, and you would never have known that if you didn't write it up and submit it, either for a newsletter or for a magazine or anything like that. So, writing is definitely a good thing to do. I just need to do it more. So you have the opportunity that you can actually write something about your family and submit it, and someone else may be doing the same thing you're doing, waiting for that article that you're going to submit to find out more information. So, or even if you have a photo. Yeah, because a couple generations down the road will be thankful for what you did. I mean, I would have loved to have a diary of my ancestors, or a journal where they're detailing their years in the Civil War, or what it was like on a homestead, or something like that. It'd be awesome. But
And you could be that person.
You're right. I could, because I just have to make the time to do it.
And
So.
I put pictures in
That's
albums,
wonderful.
so they know what we look
Did
like.
you write the stories with them?
Now, this,
You could take a piece of paper like this, write the story, cut it out, make it pretty.
I'm
Put it
into
in.
scrapbooking too.
Yeah, but you can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that in a picture, you might as well put a story with it.
Yep.
I had them bring in pictures. I said, I don't care if it's your dog, your favorite Aunt Marion, or Uncle Harry, I don't care. Bring in a picture, write me a story.
Mm-hmm.
They had all summer, and then I had them all write 1 year their husbands' obituaries or their spouses' obituaries. So I had a couple of guys too. And then the next one I had them do theirs. They had all summer to figure out what they wanted to say. Then when they came in,
Yeah.
that was their summer homework.
Now, I've already thought about writing mine out.
Mine's not done yet. I'm still learning.
Well, you want part of that estate plan. You just don't put your date of death in there.
Yeah.
But that way, if you write up your own obituary, you know what's in there, and you can keep the relationships the correct way. So some of these other obituaries you read, it's like, what in the world does this mean? So, and I do have an example coming up with the obituary here.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
I like the smaller groups. So, and I've missed doing my in-person programming. So, before you cast your net in the ocean of websites, and I'm using this pun because the Summer Reading Club, like I told Terry earlier, Summer Reading Club is oceans of possibilities. So, before you cast your net in the ocean of websites, you need to have some basic information. A name, a date, a place of the event may help out. You need to know what information you are looking for, and this will help you direct in terms of which database you want to use or how you want to approach your online research. You also want to become familiar with the types of your genealogy resources available online. If you do not know, you have someone here locally who can help you. There's 3 of us that work upstairs, or you can even go to Ashland or wherever. If you don't know for sure, don't be afraid to ask someone who's done research for suggestions, or just Google it. Now, I know earlier I said, everything, Google doesn't know everything. Google knows a lot of stuff, and you can find out a lot of good information just by Googling something. So when you want to begin researching online, or even if you want to begin researching by going to a library, you want to create a research plan. Do either of you create a research plan before you go on your hunt?
Well, I just go through, I want to look for this person.
So you at least have a checklist.
I have
Okay.
a checklist of names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I can give my husband that list and send him searching. And he puts a marker in the pages and brings them. So yeah, it does. I don't do like the one that they show on her thing. You probably make up your own too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You write the date on it?
No.
I write the date on mine because sometimes I forget where I was.
Yeah. So if you're actually creating a research plan, you want to have your objective of the research. What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to find? You also want to include what information do you already know? And what are the possible resources that you may need to look in that may provide you clues to finding out the information you're actually seeking? You may want to spend some time doing search on like WorldCat or ArchiveGrid or some of the others to find out the location of the resources. Even Family Search Wiki can help out if you're starting research in a new area. Family Search Wiki is a terrific research tool to use to find out what type of resources may be available.
Family Search Wiki?
Yeah, Family Search Wiki.
It's really good.
It's awesome. Yeah.
But verify it.
Yes.
Don't take it for gospel. You must verify it.
Yeah, but it is a good starting spot.
It is.
So, like I had someone who had sent in a request. He wanted a death certificate for someone who died in 1820 in Ohio. It's like, yeah, apparently you didn't do your homework. You're not going to find a death certificate in Ohio that early on. So.
But you can find a newspaper article.
Maybe, if you have an existing newspaper for that time period. Or you may find a land deed, or you may find a probate court record that may provide clues to the death date.
Or a church bulletin.
Mm-hmm. A church record, anything like that. So a couple weeks ago, my mom texted me, and my mom lives up in Akron, and she gets a newspaper to read the obituaries. She enjoys going through the obituaries. God bless her. She finds out quite a bit of information that way. And she saw a Marvin G. Reed listed in the newspaper. And he was born in West Virginia, and he died in July there in the Akron area. So this is just like a couple weeks ago. And she, just the way it was written up, it gives some like beakers to my mom. It piqued her interest. She's like, okay, is Marvin G. Reed connected? Because her mom is a Reed. And some of the Reeds have moved down to West Virginia. The ones that we descend from stayed there in Washington County, Ohio, but there's a whole nother from a second marriage that moved down to Tyler County, West Virginia. And we had went down to a reunion several years ago. It was the year before my aunt had passed away, to a Reed Craig reunion. Now, we weren't sure exactly how we tie in with the Reeds, because Reeds is a common name, of course, like Smith, Jones, Johnson. But we went down, had a good time. I actually won a horseshoe contest, but we never went back down, and then COVID broke out.
Did you write about that?
No, of course not. So basically, my mom was saying, well, who is Marvin Reed? Is he a relative? And if he is a relative, how is he connected to the family? So I was like, okay, I'll get to this. I didn't hop right on it because I had a lot of other stuff going on. And I said, this is like a great idea for my program coming up that I haven't planned for yet. So first off, I need to find a copy. Now remember, I'm doing research online to try to fill in some of this information. And so I need to locate a copy of the obituary for Marvin Reed. Now I didn't have immediate access to the Beacon Journal, so I went ahead and just did a Google search. And I actually found his obituary. It was on the funeral home's website. Now I have a notation here. The recent trend is not necessarily to publish news obituaries in the newspapers. It costs too much money.
$700
For one,
in the Times Reporter for New Philly and Dover.
$700.
$700
For one.
for one.
Oh my God.
Yes. So, and this happened, my dad's sister-in-law just passed away. They did not publish an obituary in the newspaper. However, you can find something on like the funeral home's website, or there's also like legacy.com that sometimes have some recent obituaries. So,
They're really good.
yeah,
Are they free?
yeah,
Yes.
yes, they are free.
The legacy.com is a good one to use.
Mm-hmm,
They have it, they're almost in every state.
mm-hmm.
What about the funeral home's website? Are those-
Yeah, those are a lot of them.
The funeral home and legacy is right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can search, and you can search old ones that give you an alphabet. Like say it's Oliver, last name is Oliver. You could go click on O, and then it'll give you as far back as if they have digitized of all the Oliver obituaries.
mm-hmm. So it's one of those other resources that a lot of people don't think about, but I use it more than once. You can also sometimes find on Find a Grave, they don't actually publish the newspaper because they're not supposed, or publish the obituary, they're not supposed to for the recent ones. But a lot of times they may write it out or type out the highlights or the whole thing. Other individuals are using Facebook to notify about deaths. For example, with my aunt, with her passing, her oldest daughter was just going to post it on Facebook to spread the word, which is great if you actually have Facebook, if you have website, but not everyone goes on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, but I'm not active on Facebook. My older sister's on Facebook all the time, and so she knows all the cousins of the cousins of the cousins that I have no idea, and I'm the genealogist of the family. Go figure. My younger sister actually had found the notice on Facebook, and then my mom had found it through, I think, the newcomers' website for my aunt. But in this case, I found it on the funeral home's website. On Donovan Funeral Home, which is where he was going to be, the funeral service was going to be, and this is there in Talmadge. They're on the Talmadge Circle, actually, if you're familiar with the Akron area. And information found in the obituary included birth date, his birthplace, included his parents' names, his siblings' names, both the deceased and the survivors. It gave his wife's given name. It gave the children's names and who their spouses were. It gave the grandchildren's names, including their surnames. Yay. And so you could connect the grandchildren with the children. It gave the death date, the burial place, the occupation, community involvement. He was actually the one responsible for organizing the Reed reunion for 50 years. And his face, when I saw his picture, it's like, oh yeah, I recognize him from going down there.
I have a question about, because we're writing our own obituaries, right? Now, when you have them published, whether you do it in the paper or online or whatever, can you do it in the first person? Like, I did this and I did that, and I knew,
I have
I
seen,
want to thank this person.
I have seen that before. There's some very
So it's not like,
no, it's kind of weird. There's been some that's been really interesting that my husband has found in a newspaper, just not your traditional obituary. So if you want to have some fun, go ahead and do it in the first person.
I thought that would be like,
Yeah.
and 2003, I did the grand tour all the way to Alaska and back, and we saw blah, 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 and then the Maritimes, Newfoundland and all the stuff we did, but, I want to do it like in the first person.
Yeah, why not?
But I
Be
think
creative.
I didn't know if that was like,
Appropriate.
that's the word, appropriate.
How do you know what's appropriate these days?
You know what, I won't hear it because I'm dead.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But again, something to chuckle about. So it's like, now I'd like to know that woman growing, in life. So there's a lot of good information within this obituary. So what I did, I wanted to organize the information by using a family group sheet, okay? Now I could type it into Roots Magic, no problem, or whatever your software program is. But if you go onto the Ohio Genealogical Society's website, you can download a PDF of a family group sheet as well as a PDF of an ancestor chart. And it's just
Protected document file.
yeah, let me go on here and show this to you because a lot of people don't realize this. So we go to the genealogy resources, library special collections. Right here you have a family group sheet and you have a pedigree chart. You can actually fill these in online and save it and then go back and edit it at a later point. You can save it on your own flash drive.
On the OGS site. Okay, ogs.org, right?
Yeah, I went to ogs.org, go into genealogy sources, and then library special collections. And that's where you're going to find the pedigree chart and a family group sheet. Okay.
Oh, that would be awesome to do it.
So, but this is some of the information that was pulled from, some of the information that was pulled from the obituary, and some was a little bit extra information. So, it gave his birth date. It gave that he was born in Elm Grove, there in West Virginia. It gave that he was married, I think, in 1959. He died July 8th. He's buried July 14th. He's buried there at Talmadge Cemetery. It gives that his father's name was Roy and his mom's name was Mary. It did not give the maiden name of the mom. I just filled it in later. And it actually gave that his wife was M. Joan Case. I did a little bit further research and found out it's Martha Joan. And she was born in 1940 in Kentucky. It gave, and I found her parents' names using the census record. And it gave 4 kids, Tamela, Julie, Jody, and Chip. And it gave the actual married names of these individuals. And except I didn't get the main name for Julie yet. And it also gave the what the married name would be. So I just took what information off the obituary and I tried to fill it in here so I knew what I was going for. I did further research and I went ahead and here's the pedigree chart. And I keep editing it because I had saved it. You can just save it here, save it to a flash drive, save it to your desktop, whatever it may be. And you can actually edit it accordingly. You can print these out if you want blank forms. I really like it. It's the best one I've seen so far.
I've not seen this. Why have I not seen this?
That's why you come to these classes. Sometimes I show you something a little bit different that maybe you're not be aware of. But here's Marvin Glenn Reed, born 1938, Wheeling, Ohio County, West Virginia. A little bit different than what the others said, what the obituary said, so it gave a little bit of information that wasn't correct. I found out that his father was Roy Craig Reed.
So he is related to you guys?
No, not yet, not that I have found. And we have Mary Bitzer Shook. So I did some research, and so, she was born in Elm Grove, died November 4, 2006, Summit County. I have not got their obituaries yet. I could, if I wanted to follow through. But I did further research, and I did research online to try to fill in all this information. So I did not access a book at all. I did not go into microfilm. I accessed this online. Now, I didn't fill in this information because I was focusing on the Reed side of the family. Because I know on the Reed side of the family that I'm descended from a Robert Reed, born 1812, 1814 time period. He was married in Portage County, which later became Summit County. And you'll see here, after doing research, you'll see there's a pattern going on. They like using maiden names as middle names.
Oh, yeah.
And this is throughout. I don't find this in any of my other family lines, but this line, I'm finding it, okay? So I found that Roy Craig Reed was born in 1909 in Washington County, Pennsylvania. He died in Orange County, California. I don't know why he's out there in 1976, but that's where he's at. He was the son of James Parker Reed and Laura Agnes Craig. Roy Craig, Laura Agnes Craig. He's taken his mom's maiden name. I got there.
He was working at Disneyland.
maybe,
That's
yeah,
what county.
maybe the Rose Bowl, you know.
No, that's LA County.
Oh, okay.
I'm on vacation.
He could have died on vacation. That's a possibility.
Oh.
Because I have found that even in the Daily Record, there's been some obituaries that someone died up in Canada on a fishing trip. And they're from some of this area. So they very well could have been visiting out there in California and he died.
A car accident or something.
Right. Right. And of course, if you wouldn't have had access to online records, you would not have been able to find that, really, at least as easily as what I was able to pull this up. So you have James Parker Reed, you have James Smiley Reed, you have John Reed. So you have John Reed born 1797 in Virginia. And I found another source earlier that indicates he's descended from Irish parents. I do not have Irish on the Reed side of the family as far as I know. So nothing is lining up. So as far back as there, we are not connected.
How about your DNA? Irish?
No. No, very little.
I know.
I have Welsh a little bit from the strikers.
Well, Welsh could be descended from Irish.
You just never know.
Yeah.
You never know. So,
Yeah.
but you do see there's Benjamin Craig, Adeline Sarah Porter.
Yep.
So I was able to fill this in just using information through several websites. I went beyond Ancestry and Family Search. I didn't have access to Ancestry, so I had to fill in a few more things on Ancestry. I like Ancestry because of the hints. Family Search does not give me the hints. And those Family Search hints really help out. Now, I do not treat them as gospel. I check to make sure that they are giving me the correct hint.
Family Search gives you those possibles, though.
It's not quite the same thing. With Ancestry, you have those hints on the right-hand side that you can click on.
Yeah.
That links everything together. It's not as nicely organized in Family Search as it is on Ancestry. Let me put it that way. So yeah, you do have some hints and stuff on Family Search, but I really like how Ancestry includes those hints. So
I haven't done any family trees online or anything.
I don't do that either at this point.
And by my experience, do this. Because this is in your computer, you could go and see where it's highlighted. You could change anything there if you find something different that's proved. You could change. That's the thing about this that I like. Is, like I said, that one that relative put in, my cousin put in, I can't get it off. You cannot change it. All you can do is put it, a reason why you know it doesn't belong or you think it doesn't belong. And you gotta do it without insulting a family member. It's not easy because you know how I am. But so this is the way right here.
So it's really a nice tool, and like
you
it's
can print it.
and you can print it, you can save it, etc. So once again, it's a tool that you found online that you can fill in and you can save it online, etc. So
I'm going to use this. That's going to be what I do from now on.
So I captured a screenshot there just in case. And
I've been to that. I've worked over there, done stuff over there. Well, Alto, I went with Alto. I gave him my list, and I sent him to search books. And he brought, and he had given him the markers. And then when it was getting time to close, because I was there 8 hours, she said, we're going to close and blah, blah. I said, start copying. Here's some money. And he just, it was a nickel a copy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just, whatever the information was, he went and started printing it for me. And we got it all done. The only thing is, I don't have the source citations because I did not explain to him to take a copy of the
title page.
title page.
Yeah.
So, but I know with books, I can pretty much figure out where they came from, but I have to go through those again. But it was great while it lasted.
So following the research plan, I need to determine, I was trying to see if there is a link between Marvin G. Reed's ancestors and my grandmother's ancestors on the Reed side. So my objective was to determine the parents of Roy and Mary Reed, who were the parents of Marvin G. Reed. Okay, that's what my objective was for the research. If you have a research plan, it prevents you from going down those bunny trails sometimes too.
I do that.
So, and here, like as part of the research plan, I mentioned that you want to include what information you know. So I summarized the information that was found in the obituary. And then I think of what possible resources. So if he's born in 1938, the first census he's going to appear in is 1940. And he should be in the 1950 census. And so I'd be looking for Martin Glenn Reed. I'd have to look for Marvin G. Reed, or maybe Glenn Reed, possibly. Thankfully, he went by Marvin. And then the 1940 and 1950 census would give me clues to the ages of Roy and Mary. So I can then try to follow them in the earlier census records. And I would check Family Search or Ancestry for those. I wanted to try to find maybe a marriage record for Marvin and Glenn Reed. I'm thinking, well, maybe Ancestry or Family Search would work for that. There was a possibility that Roy and Reed may have been married in West Virginia, because remember, it showed that the son was born in West Virginia. So it's a possible place. Like I said, this is just possibilities. I do know West Virginia has vital records online that are in digital format and they're searchable, but I like using Family Search, its search feature, over the archives of West Virginia. Because West Virginia, if you go onto their page, you have to type in exactly the way it is on the record. Family Search gives you some latitude where it will actually search for possible other spellings and stuff. So I take the information from Family Search, and then or even from Ancestry, I think they have links, and then I go to the West Virginia archives, and I pull the actual images from there.
Do you still use RootsWeb for some of that, especially for the names?
You could. That's one of them. I have listed the US GenWeb, so you could do that. RootsWeb, GenWeb. So that's one of those. It's still a great resource, and a lot of people don't take advantage of that as much anymore, but it's still a good place to go, especially if you're at a brick wall or you just want to have some ideas. So this is the end result of the research at this point. At least I cannot find any direct connection to my mother as far back as about 4 generations. So my mother is descended from Robert Reed, 1812 to 1884. He did die in Tyler County, West Virginia. Orson Sheldon Reed, 1840 to 1938. He died in Washington County, Ohio. Robert Martin Reed, 1866 to 1947. Then my grandmother, Dorothy Reed Wayne, and then my mom. Marvin Glenn Reed is the son of James Smiley Reed, 1824 to 1913. James Parker Reed, 1874 to 1976. Roy Craig Reed, and Marvin Glenn. So you're seeing that they're just not matching. So the websites used as part of this research: Google, Donovan Funeral Home, the Ohio Genealogical Society, Family Search, West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History, Find a Grave, Ancestry Library Edition, Indiana State Library.
Wow.
I use more resources than just Family Search and just Ancestry.
Right.
So, and that's the one thing I want to get across to the individuals here or the individuals who may later view the YouTube video. Open up your mind and use other resources than what the standard would be. Go beyond Family Search, go beyond Ancestry, go beyond Find a Grave, Fold 3. Yeah, Billion Graves.
That's a good one.
It's a good one. Yeah, most of the links go directly to Find a Grave. Find a Grave is owned by Ancestry, which is why you see those more often. Billion Graves, there's a free part of it, and then there's a subscription-based. But you can access a lot of information just through the free options. And with Billion Graves, individuals can go to the actual cemetery and take pictures, and it's going to record the GPS. And so you can actually have the GPS of that actual tombstone, and you just upload it through their app. Fold 3 is a military database, but there's a lot more to Fold 3 than just military. Fold 3 also includes the Project Blue Book, which is kind of cool to listen to. The UFOs and sightings, it's kind of cool just to read through some of that stuff. Yeah. It does include the Pennsylvania Archives, which is supposed to be a free part of the Fold 3, but I never could get into it with the free version. And that is colonial Pennsylvania. research. We have the books upstairs, but it's easier to go to folder 3 and try to search. It does include Native American research now, as well as Black American research. And they have U.S. Census weapons, U.S. Census records on there. I was thinking military weapons. No, folder 3 though, we get through the state library.
Right.
Same thing with Ancestry. So those two, and then Heritage Quest Online, which we're having a few issues with.
Folder 3 is not inexpensive.
No, it's kind of cumbersome to search. I mean, it's not the easiest, but you got to take the time and browse through and stuff like that. So I do want to clarify, a lot of times, I'm talking about Ancestry, Family Searches databases. Just keep in mind that these are like mega databases with a lot of individual databases that make up the big mega database. And you have like a global search, but you can also go in and search individual databases, which is highly recommended because the global search does not always catch everything. So you can go in and just switch your search feature and go, if you want to just search the Ohio deaths, you can just search like the Ohio deaths, for example, or the Ohio births. Keep in mind that these are commercial they're companies, and they're looking for a profit. They go out and they have contractual agreements with other entities that owns this information. So Ancestry does not own that data. Folder 3 does not own that data.
They're like renting it.
Yes, it's almost like a lease type thing. The databases can disappear. So what's there one day may not be there the next day. So if you find something, print it out or save it, because you don't know. Or write it down. Years ago, the library edition of Ancestry had like the immigration passenger list, the big beige set upstairs. That you cannot access through the library edition anymore, but you can access through the home edition. At least the last I knew you could. So that was one that we used to have access to, and then they eliminated it. So you have to keep that in mind. So, and this is even with Family Search. Family Search does not own all those records. They are a library, they are a storage place for it, but when they had to go back, they had to sign agreements, contractual agreements to do the microfilming. Before they were able to go put anything out online, they had to go back and renegotiate every single one of those contracts to enable them to put those digital images online. Find My Past has a strong focus on European research. We do not have access to that. It used to have Percy, but now Percy's back to Allen County Public Library. They took it back. Yeah. Percy is a periodical source index, which is another terrific resource. It just takes time. You're not going to find a lot of digital images, but you can. Percy is actually, Allen County Public Library staff has taken upon themselves to index every single genealogical and local history periodical that's ever come through their library. And they make that, it's a lot of work. They don't have the actual digital images with it, but you can use Archive Grid, or you can contact Allen County Public Library and they can make copies of pages for you for a fee, of course.
For a fee, yeah.
But when you're starting research online, it's going to depend on what you're looking for in terms of where you want to go to search. And don't forget about the methodology. You can go into Family Search Wiki. You can do Ancestry. There's some learning centers there. If you want to look at how to do things, you may want to go there. Historical laws and private public acts, they include a lot of good information. And those are available through the Library of Congress. Educational opportunities.
A lot or not?
I use WorldCat on a regular.
I use WorldCat.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
It's a huge tool.
Yeah.
I use Google Books.
Yeah, Google Books, yeah. Hathy Trust is good as well. Chronicling America is another database through Library of Congress.
And History.org for world events and making your timelines is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Ancient Faces.
Yeah, I'm quickly going through some of these.
That's a good book. I mean, that's a good program for you.
Yeah, there's Heritage Quest directories, census records, county family histories, Freeman's Bank records. There's some Revolutionary War pension papers on there, but they're not complete. Folder 3 would be more complete. So do not forget about your local library or your local genealogical society or your local historical society. They may very well have digital collections. Check with universities. They have free labor.
Oh, yeah.
They do a lot of digitizing. The College of Worcester, they have a digital collection.
Ohio University in Athens.
Mm-hmm.
Huge program.
Yes. So these are some websites that it may take you more time to try to find them or to sort through some of their stuff because they're not going to be the mega databases, but they can be well worth your time and effort to search them or to browse through them. Do not forget your local genealogical societies. The Ashland County Chapter OGS has a pretty good website. Don't forget about OGS. They have, if you're a member of the Ohio Genealogical Society, there is a membership side of the website. You can go in and access a lot more records, a lot of indexes and stuff like that. And they're going to be revamping their website a little bit, making it easier and less clunky and stuff to go through. Don't forget about the Ohio Memory Project or the American Memory Project. We have a subscription to American Ancestor. So if you have those New England folks, you may want to. American Ancestors?
New England.
Oh.
Yeah, the American Ancestors, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, we do have a subscription for that here. It's not used as near as often, but it can provide a lot of good information on there, especially in the New England area. And of course, don't forget Facebook page. Don't forget your archives. Don't forget your federal government. They may have a lot of good information. Here's digital collections through the Library of Congress. They have a slew of them, and they're adding stuff more and more on there. Here's the Century of Lawmaking for a New Nation. This one I was not aware of till several years ago when I took a genealogy law class. But you may find in the public acts and private acts, you may find your ancestors listed. They had to go through the legislation in order to receive a pension. You may find information there. You may find divorce records here. You may find a hodgepodge of stuff here. So here's Chronicling America. These newspapers usually are pre-1923, maybe 1925 now, because those are the ones in the public domain. The other thing, though, don't just limit it to just the digitized images. There is a complete U.S. newspaper directory from 1690 to the present. So you can look at like a particular town or a county and see what newspapers may exist for that time period, and then see if you can locate a library or an archive that may have a copy of those newspapers on microfilm or in a digitized format. Yeah. And then you have, of course, the National Archives. You're not going to necessarily find actual records on there, but you're going to find a lot of finding aids. And you're going to find military forms, immigration forms, passenger lists. You're going to find blank census forms on here. It gives you a lot of other information, a lot of blogs on here. It talks about the fate of the 1890 census and how it really wasn't destroyed by fire. It was destroyed later on by the U.S. government. So you can find a lot of good information.
You can find Indian lists on there too.
Yes, you can. Indian lists, yes.
I have found so many on there.
If you're looking for obituaries, we talked about legacy.com. You may find a Grave, Billion Graves, online newspapers at the local level, News Bank, Genealogy Bank.
Okay. I'm done.
Yeah, here's another one we want to take. These are some digitized newspapers. And once again, the ones that cost something, I have a little $sign to represent. Yes, that's through the Ohio Historical Connection.
Okay.
Yes, and we have a couple of our newspapers through them. If you're looking for U.S. Census records, 1790 to 1950, these are some of the different websites you can use. And Vital Records, just a few. There's a lot of other places on there. These are just a couple of them. So we've talked a little bit about the myths. We talked about some of the pitfalls of doing research. If we talked a little bit about the research plan, have a plan in mind before you actually begin searching, whether it's online or going to a library. Take the extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes for planning because it may save you a whole lot of headache later on down the road. So, you guys have any other questions?